Okay, I'll Slack out the lesson plan in just a second, although if you have it, feel free to do so. But yeah, so this class is going to be all about jQuery. Just by a quick show of hands, who's used jQuery before? All right, a good chunk of you. So this is going to be review-y for you guys, but maybe we'll also talk a little bit about what's going on under the hood with jQuery. But the whole motto of jQuery is write less, do more. So here is a quick little poll I would like to take. Given the two of these things that I'm about to write, and assuming they do the exact same thing, which would you prefer to write? Hold up, wait, I didn't actually tell you.
No, it's fine.
That, or which would you prefer? Yeah, right? Okay, so let's see. How about okay, out of those two. Yeah, bottom one, right? Yeah. So those of you who've used jQuery before know that this is jQuery and this is not jQuery. So here on out, we're going to refer to not jQuery as vanilla JavaScript. So that's a programming term used to mean like a language that hasn't been doctored up at all. So you might have vanilla Ruby, you might have vanilla Python, whatever. Here we're dealing with vanilla JavaScript. That is JavaScript right out of the box. So there's that, and then there's jQuery. And jQuery is a bunch of JavaScript that somebody wrote so you don't have to. It's really annoying to write document get element by ID, so they wrote something so you don't have to write document get element by ID. jQuery is just a whole bunch of JavaScript that has already been written for you. A whole bunch of are called convenience methods, functions that make life more convenient for you. And in fact, you can write your own jQuery. And I do this a lot. If you go to pretty much any site I've made and look at the JavaScript behind it, there's usually called something called helpers that has a whole bunch of like convenience functions I put in it that aren't like specific to that site, just things that are handy to have around. So one thing I do really frequently is this. I'll create a function called L. And then I'll have this function do document query selector all name. And it just returns that. And that's it. So the whole point of this is just for me to not have to write document query selector all the time. Instead of writing that, I can just write L and then whatever it is I want. And it does the exact same thing without me having to write, however many characters that is, a lot. So this is an example of a convenience method. Something where it doesn't do anything crazy. I mean, it's like literally the exact same thing as document query selector all. It's just makes it so I don't have to write as much code. And that's what jQuery is all about. You not having to write as much code. It's nothing too crazy, just you not having to write as much code. So they took all the things that you're most likely to want to do when you're working on a website, and they made a whole bunch of convenience methods for those, so it's not quite so crazy. So jQuery is an example of a library. What are some other libraries that you've seen out in the wild? Yeah, Matt? Bootstrap. That's a fantastic example. So Bootstrap is just a whole bunch of CSS classes someone wrote. So we've all written CSS classes before. Bootstrap is just CSS classes someone else wrote, and you can just put them right into your HTML, and that's it. So a library is just like a big old collection of stuff that you can sort of pick and choose from and put into your code as you want. That's different from a framework. So we have libraries and we have framework. The way that frameworks are usually, well, the difference is usually said that you put a library into your code and you put your code into a framework. So you put a library into your code and you put your code into a framework. What that means is with JavaScript, you can use the with jQuery, you can use the $ thing, you can use other convenience methods it has, and you can just sort of pick and choose those as you want.
But if you're using a framework like Angular or Meteor or React, there are very, very specific rules you have to follow when you're using that framework. And so with jQuery, you can just sort of use it however you want. If you're using Angular or one of those, you have to write your code in a very, very specific way or else it doesn't work. So you can make a library follow your rules, but you have to make your code follow the rules of a framework. And so it's kind of a gray area between those. Like Bootstrap, some people say it's a library, some people say it's a framework. I'd say it's a library, but you can use it like a framework where if you really, really get into Bootstrap and you just sort of follow all of Bootstrap's rules, you can get a lot of good stuff out of it, but it also means you're following all of Bootstrap's rules. So anyway, that's just sort of like semantics. But before we get into jQuery, what I would like you guys to do is refresh yourselves a little bit on, let me pull this up. I'd like you to refresh yourselves a little bit on JavaScript selectors, selecting things in JavaScript. That's because the way you select things in jQuery is using CSS selectors. So this pound logo, that's how you would write your CSS if you wanted some styles just to apply to something with the ID of logo. This .post, this is how you would write CSS if you wanted something just to apply to elements with the class of post. So if I wanted to write some styles for any P tags, I would write P. If I wanted to write styles for any anchors, any links, I would just write A. And you select things in jQuery the exact same way. So jQuery kind of revolves around using all of these different selectors. So what I'd like you to do is first clone down this thing. So I'm going to slack out the lesson plan. You don't have to clone that down. I'm just slacking it out for you to have it. That's not what I wanted. What I would like you to clone down is this my blog thing. You don't have to fork it. You really only have to fork stuff if you're going to be turning it in later and you're not going to be turning this in. It's just an example. So please just clone that down. And I'll do it myself up here. I'm just going to clone it onto my desktop. Oops. And then once you've cloned it down, open up the index.html in your browser. And you're done when you get to this point. Anyone having trouble? All right, cool. So these buttons don't do anything. And all of this text down here, this is that hipster Ipsum text you may have seen before, where it's just like random words. I don't know what like any of them mean, so apparently I'm not a hipster. So you'll notice that in the README for this my blog thing at this link, there are 3 different parts to it. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to just do Part 1. So don't worry about the other 2 parts right now. Just worry about Part 1. And Part 1 is just doing stuff with vanilla JavaScript. The easiest way to do it, I think, would be to do it in your console in Chrome, but you can really do it however you want, whatever floats your boat. But I would say just do it in here if you want the easiest way. So I'll give you 10 minutes to do that. I would like you to please work with the people next to you. So if you're not sitting immediately next to someone, then please either scooch them over or scooch yourself over so you're next to them. And then I'll check back in 10 minutes.